Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is a listener request, and the question is how to know when you're ready to compete. Now, the person who asked for this was actually asking in more towards aesthetics, like how do they know if they were big enough to then start dieting down for a competition? So what I wanted to do was kind of expand on that and talk about kind of aesthetics for like competition prep, and then also competition should you compete for also like powerlifting and strongman. So we get a lot of listeners who kind of blend into these three categories, where in the aesthetics this could be, for women it could be bikini, wellness, figure, and physique. And for men, they have physique, classic physique, and bodybuilding. By the time you're listening to this, they could have made new categories, who knows? So anybody who's in that world will laugh and know what that joke is about, because they're always making new categories. But so that kind of aesthetics covers all of that. And then we have powerlifting, and then we have strongman, and we have people who do CrossFit, we have people who do general fitness, all these other things. So I'm trying to hit like kind of the big ones, and then if there's any individuals out there who have a specific request. So I actually have a listener who does the Highland Games, which is kind of cool, and we've touched base on just concepts for training and stuff, so that's kind of neat. But so we'll go with this, and you can probably extrapolate what I say here to whatever your field of competition is. But if you have any specific questions, feel free to tell us, okay, or ask us. Our email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. So, in general, let's go through some thoughts. For the aesthetics people, is how do you know kind of when you have enough muscle, when you have enough balance, enough shape to then start getting ready for a competition? And I'm going to give you a general answer, then I will go back through and give you specifics on it. But the general answer is you're never really going to know. So you can look up and see, like for a traditional male bodybuilding, okay, they can look up and see, okay, at my height, what is the weight classes people typically compete in? So maybe, for 5'8", they might find that, in drug tested competitions, maybe the people are typically like 165 to 185. I'm just making up numbers. In non-tested, they might find out that the guys are like 205 or 225. So you have to you can do that and see, but that's really complicated and it kind of doesn't really tell you exact. So just because everybody else does that doesn't mean your body type is going to fit exactly the same way as everybody else's does. So everybody does have variances and differences. So my answer for most people is going to be, before you compete, make sure you have the quality of training and the adherence ability for both training and nutrition to actually do what's necessary to compete. And what I mean by that is you might have all the muscle in the world. You might have the best shape, the best booty, all that stuff. But if you can't follow a diet, how in the world are you going to get ready for a competition? So when you compete and do diets for competitions, there is zero leeway for things to be wrong. Every single thing you get wrong is some percentage of a percentage that you will not look as good as you could have on stage. So in a 16-week prep, if I made 10 mistakes, that means I could have been 10 mistakes better than what I looked like on stage. Now that's a lot of pressure. Sometimes people don't like that pressure, but hey, if you're competing, you're putting pressure on yourself. That welcome to the sport, okay? So that's kind of the way it works. So what I would suggest is that you take 6 to 12 months. Make sure you have at least 6 to 12 months of training and following some type of a diet. It doesn't have to be a fat loss diet. It can actually be a weight gain diet. So maybe you're in your off season and you're trying to build muscle, or you're trying to have at least enough calories to have muscle growth potential. So maybe you don't want to be a fatty in your off season, but you're eating enough that allows you to grow. You need to see, am I adhering to my diet at least 90%? Am I adhering to my training and not missing training days and making sure I'm getting in all the exercises I should at least 90%? And I would say do that for 6 months. Now, some people might think that that's a bit extreme. However, my opinion towards this is why start a prep with a whole bunch of expectations and maybe pay money towards a show, start telling friends and family you want to go towards a show, and then all of a sudden you find out, holy shit, I don't have what it takes yet. I don't have the discipline, I don't have the look yet, and then you have to undo all that stuff. And it creates a lot of pressure. People get kind of disappointed in themselves. They'll feel like a failure. So don't do that to yourself. Don't cause yourself unnecessary stress. So take 6 months and see if you can adhere to a training schedule for 90% quality, and you can adhere to your nutrition for 90%. And that'll help, okay? So then when if you have enough muscle, and if you have enough conditioning, if you have all the right things ready to start dieting for competition, you'll first of all now know that you have the willpower and the discipline. That's what separates overwhelmingly most athletes. So I train people for these type of competitions. So I train people for every category of aesthetic competition, and I've helped people get pro cards. So I do know what I'm talking about. And that's overwhelmingly what you see is the best physiques don't always turn out to be the best competitors. Because sometimes people have a great physique, but they have no willpower, they have no discipline, they're not focused, they're doing, often doing, things outside of the gym that pull them away from their adherence. So they go to try to get ready for a show, they don't follow everything directly, they kind of rely on their genetics because their genetics have always worked for them, and all of a sudden they either don't make it to the show because they don't look good enough on time, or they go to the show and they don't look that really great, they get their ass handed to them by somebody that outworked them, and then they get frustrated. And then hopefully sometimes they come back super serious and crush it. But sometimes they fade away because it wasn't as easy as they thought it would be. So sometimes when people have it easy with natural genetics, they don't have the willpower and the discipline and the work ethic, and they've never had to have it, so they never built it. So then they get their ass handed to them when they try to compete and stuff. And sometimes people don't step up to that challenge to better themselves. So that's what I would suggest is before you even think about dieting for a competition and worrying if you have the aesthetic requirements, make sure you have the willpower and the discipline requirements. So we do have diet adherence tracking sheets. If you'd like one, email us brutalironGym@gmail.com. We have a bunch of sample kind of training programming and stuff like that. So if you just want some examples that we've written for past clients, again, you can reach out to our email, brutalironGym@gmail.com. We'll send you some stuff. So it's all free. Now, if you want actual programming for you, we do charge for that, but it is a service we offer. But if you just want some information to see what other people have done, we'll happily send that to you, okay? So now, once you kind of feel like you've adhered well and you have the discipline for it, the next thing I would say is to do a test prep. So I have done 3 test preps myself where I went through all the steps and stages and everything you do to get on stage. Now, I have not competed myself, okay, because I have a ton of injuries. I've torn 17 muscles, 6 ligaments, and I've broken some bones. And I don't look very balanced. And a personal choice that I'm making is to not compete in my 20s and 30s because you get severely penalized score-wise for asymmetries. And I don't want to go to a show and not place well and not look the way that I want to look. So I have dieted down to competition quality. So I've dieted down under 10%, and I've had, 6-pack abs, I've done what I needed to do. So I'm not skirting around the misery. I've done the misery 3 times. But every time I diet down, I just look weird. I've partially torn my pec a couple times. So I have a bunch of aesthetic-based things so I decided to focus on powerlifting and kind of build up more musculature to hide those aesthetic weaknesses. And since that time I decided to do so, I was at 220. I'm now at 280, by the way. And I have no, major belly. I have semi-visible abs at 280, which is pretty good. So the reason why I say all this is I have not competed myself, but I have done exactly what would be required to compete, except for stepping on stage 3 times, and then I've helped enormous amounts of people compete. So I am aware of what it takes, even though I haven't done it myself. Now, will there be some new things that I'll learn when the day I do compete? Oh, hell yes. There will be some nuances and some weird stuff that maybe I haven't personally felt myself, but I've watched my competitors feel, dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So there will be some separation. I'm not, blind to that. But what I'm getting to here in a long way is to do test preps. So like I said, I've done them myself, and they are ridiculously super helpful. So I've taken various time frames to do them, but a general prep for most competitions is going to be somewhere around 12 to 16 weeks. I tend to take clients around 16 to 20 weeks, so that way we have 4 weeks to just kind of clean up our natural habits from the off season and kind of get into the swing of things. But the actual prep is actually about 12 to 16 weeks. So you can do that. You can practice dieting down for competition for 12 to 16 weeks, see what you look like at the end, and if you look great and you're lean enough, shit, get on stage. If you were like me and you find out, hey, you know what, I don't quite look the way that I wanted, maybe this muscle doesn't balance to that muscle, so you can go back into your off season. But now that you did a diet, you can go into your off season leaner, and you can build out that muscle and refill out your frame. So there's a ton of benefits to kind of doing a test prep where you diet down and you get pretty freaking close to contest shape so you can assess what you look like. That is the best way to know if you're ready to compete, is to just start doing it as if you were competing. Okay? Don't announce it to people. Don't pay for the money ahead of time. Just kind of do it yourself and test and see it. Okay? But that's a good way for you to kind of test and see where you're at. So, most competitions require you to be under 10% body fat and significantly lower than that in certain categories. So sometimes I've had people, they'll go do like what's called a DEXA scan, which is the most accurate way to get your body fat scanned. Like, for example, I live about 15, 20 minutes away from downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. And they have a place there you can go for I think it's like $50 or something. And you can get a DEXA scan, a full body scan. It'll tell you how much body fat percentage you have. It also tells you like the balance of your musculature from top to bottom, left to right, different quadrants and whatnot. It's super helpful and it's really cool to see. So I've had clients do that before, to where they might say, okay, before their test prep, they might go in, get a scan done, find out they're like 22% body fat. They'll do a 12 to 16 week prep. Maybe they get down to 12% body fat or even 10% body fat. But by that time, they're kind of fried. The body's tired. They're kind of exhausted. So it gave them an idea of what it would have felt like. So let's say they got down to 10%. So they might try to hold in the off season, bounce back up to around, 14, 16%, see what they feel there, build some muscle in the off season. And then they know with the last prep they did, they were able to take off 12% body fat. So if they're hanging around, 14 to 16, then they know in their next prep they should be able to get lean enough for a contest. So you can do test experiments like that. And that is by far the best way to learn. That's how I learned all this stuff myself, is I did test preps a whole bunch on myself, did a whole bunch of diet preps and different weird strategies of, low fat, low carb, blah, 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 all these trial and error things. And I learned what was possible within a 12 to 16 week prep through my body multiple times. And then I started helping people compete. And over the years of helping more and more people compete, I've learned how to refine everything. So it's just trial and error. It's educated trial and error. So you read a lot of books, you listen to a lot of podcasts like you are now. But that's what you got to do. So if you're afraid to kind of quote unquote pull the trigger and let it go, like start working towards it, just start. Okay, you don't have to get on stage at the end of it. Just start a diet and see what happens, what it looks like. See if you have the discipline for it. See what progress you can make in a 12 to 16 week period, and then that'll help you better analyze, how far out from a show, like if you're 12 to 16 weeks out from a show, what kind of conditioning you would need to be in to make sure you're at the show on time. Okay, so that's basically what I would suggest. Is track your body weight, and you can do that through a scale, okay? You can track your body fat percentage by a DEXA scan or just by looking at pictures if you want, but a DEXA scan is by far the best way to do it. And then just track your workout and diet adherence, okay? And start testing and experimenting. Do a 12-week diet and see what you look like at the end of it. If you don't feel like you look the way you want, if you're too, you don't have enough muscle, or if you're too imbalanced, so maybe like females, maybe you're too leg dominant and you don't have any upper body muscle. So, or if you find out in 12 weeks, holy crap, it was damn near impossible to get any fat off my legs. So you can now take the condition you're in at the end of the 12 weeks and try to hold that condition and make that your new set point, where that's just the conditioning you live at now. So I've helped women specifically do that, oh my God, like hundreds of times, where we'll diet down, say we don't usually always do body fat percentage, but it helps for clarity's sake of this podcast. say they diet from like say 25% body fat, so they're relatively lean already, they look pretty good in the bathing suit and whatnot, and they diet down to say 18% body fat, and they like the looks of that. So we just try to hold that for 4 to 6 months, let it refine there, let the skin tighten, let them kind of live at that, let them boost their metabolism at that rate, at that place. And then all of a sudden they like that and they're living at 18%. So then we go for another diet, we get them down to say, 10 to 12. So it's just all in stages. So that's what I would suggest is if you're not sure if you're big enough, start dieting and you'll quickly find out how much is fat and how much is muscle. If you're not sure if you have enough balance, start dieting, and you'll quickly find out, if that big booty you thought you had is all fat or if it's actually muscle. So you just have to start. You just have to experiment and get going. Okay, that's going to be the best way to learn. And a couple resources, 3 quick ones. There's way more than 3 in our past podcast, but I just want to give you 3. Is the first one you can check out is podcast number 241, and that is Nutrition Concepts for Aesthetic Athletes. So that'll tell you kind of the important way to set up your diet so that way you can look your best if that's your goal aesthetics. We have number 69, podcast 69. It's the overview of a contest prep diet. So you can actually see how you would structure a diet through that podcast. And then podcast 231 talks about diet expectations and diet adjustment concepts. Okay, so if you notice, we don't have anything in there about programming, training, because diet's going to be overwhelmingly what most people need. Now, if you need programming help, email us at brutalironGym@gmail.com. We do not have a general aesthetics program that we hand out to people because I don't kind of believe in that because not everybody is built the same. Not everybody has the same imbalances. Like, it's super common people are going to have more dominant quads than hamstrings. Duh. Okay, it's more common that women are going to need more bodybuilding development on their upper body and more kind of athletic toning and shaping on their lower body. That's common. But at the same time, it's not the exact same for everybody. So you can get a general program, and that's okay to kind of give you an idea of where to start. But you shouldn't have to pay a lot of money for that at all. So I know women and men who go out and they buy these programs, and the assholes who sell the programs say they're personalized, and they're not. So I've seen them firsthand where they'll come in and it's, leg press for this many sets and reps, then they'll do walking lunges for this many sets and reps, leg extensions, leg curls for this many sets of reps. And that's the same workout they give to every single person who asks them for a program. So they might have, like, a trainer might say, well, here's my programming for bikini athletes. Not everybody's built the same. You have women who are upper body dominant. You have women who are lower body dominant. You have women who are coming into this at 30% body fat. You have women that are coming in like at sticks, and they need different styles of training. So some women need to train super heavy like a bodybuilder because they're very, like, their muscles and their bones and joints and everything just need, like, to be beefed up, and really they need harder, heavier training. Then you have women who are already kind of thick, and they need more high volume based training to balance out their physique and help them actually tone down into the shape that they need. So if you're getting a general based program, that thing should not cost more than $20. So if you're paying hundreds of dollars, like I saw one program, and the trainer who wrote the program for the person didn't even bother asking them if they actually had the equipment available. So they're following a program that asks for seated like leg curls, and they go to a gym that doesn't even have a seated leg curl. Clearly, that program is not personalized. If that trainer didn't bother to ask you what equipment you had available or where you trained, and they're selling you a quote-unquote personalized program, they're an asshole. Don't pay for that. Okay? So, there you go. There's my little rant. But if you would like to see the programs that we've used for past clients, email me and I'll send them to you. Okay? Free of charge. Cool. Okay. So, that's for aesthetic athletes. Just start trying, doing some test diets. Make sure you have that baseline adherence ability. So like we said, 6 months is a great timeline to see if you can adhere to a training and a diet program. And again, it can be an off-season diet. Doesn't have to be a weight loss diet. But see if you can just adhere to your diets and training first. Because then when you start a prep, you can't make mistakes. So your adherence actually has to go up. So make sure it's at least adequate at first. Then start prepping, start trying practice preps for 12 to 16 weeks. See what's possible for your body within 12 to 16 weeks. Build up your mental capabilities, build up your discipline capabilities over time. The more test preps you do, the more refined your physique gets, and the better mindset, the better strength for mindset that you get for training and nutrition. Okay, cool. So the podcast that I've referenced will be in our kind of like synopsis or summary presented on whatever the podcast platform you're listening on, but it'll be listed there. So it's podcast 241 for nutrition concepts for aesthetic athletes, podcast 69 for contest prep diet, and podcast 231 for diet expectations and diet adjustment concepts. Now, on to our strength, people. Okay, so sorry I made you guys wait, but hopefully some of that stuff was helpful as well. So the first thing we're going to look at is powerlifters. So if you want to compete in a powerlifting competition, the first thing you have to figure out is, are you actually competition standard in your training? So do you squat to parallel? Do you bench with a pause on your chest? Do you deadlift to where you actually lock out your knees rather than just flex the shit out of your lower back and hurt your lower back all the time with your head sky high staring at the ceiling, which is absolutely ridiculous. So learn how to lift properly first. Make sure your lifts are competition standard and quality, so that way you don't go to a meet and do what's called bombing out, where you miss the lifts in front of the judges and you fail the meet. Okay? So typically I would suggest you run a 12 to 16 week program, okay, 3 to 4 month program, and just do the competition standard lifts. Don't do fancy types of squats, bench, or deadlift. Just do the boring basic with a barbell, no bands, no chains. Just learn how to move the barbell correctly to the standards of a meet. Okay? Now, once you can do that, you want to go ahead and then maybe sign up for a meet and see where you're at. Okay? So while you're doing that training to get ready, you can kind of think about it's basically, you don't want to overcomplicate things as much as you can. Just make sure you can lift a good competition standard and let that be it. And then just go compete and see where you are. So often people will say, well, I don't want to compete unless I can do well. You're not going to do well. It's a first time meet. You're not going to show up and set national records at your first meet. No one does that. Yes, you might know the name of one single person out of 20,000 who've done it, but you are not them. Sorry, I don't mean to be a jerk, but you don't have to worry about showing up and trying to set some records or do amazing shit. It's your first ever meet. Just don't look like a dumbass. That's your main goal. Don't try to be amazing, just try not to be an idiot. Okay? That's hard enough, I promise. So you want to try your best to make sure your lifts are competition standards. Now, you will most likely, okay, even if your lifts are competition standard, you will learn that does not automatically mean that you will go to a meet and everything will go well. A lot of times people get kind of nervous, and there's kind of performance anxiety. And there's things that will come up on the day of a meet that you're not really aware that are going to be there. And sometimes that can shock people, and they will actually miss out on lifts. They'll bomb out on a meet, and it's unfortunately a painful part of the learning process. So they have to learn a little bit about what their performance self is like. So just like with the aesthetic people, we talked about how they have to build their adherence to dieting before they even worry about dieting. So when you want to compete, you have to make sure your lifts meet competition standards, but then you have to put yourself out there and just see how your performance self is. See if you have nervousness issues. See if you have anxiety issues, stuff like that. So just go to the first meet and just try your best to survive it. Don't worry about trying to be amazing or your best or da-da-da-da-da. Just go to the meet and see how it goes, okay? It does help if you get somebody to coach you. I'm not trying to sell my services, but it does help to have somebody who's been there before. They can tell you a little bit about what to expect, what's going to happen, and it can help you be more prepared, help you be more calm. So there is benefits to having people who have the knowledge. So for example, if you want to know if your lifts are competition quality, make sure you ask somebody who's actually competed, okay, and competed successfully. Don't ask your bro, or your broette. So ask somebody who actually knows what competition standards are, and tell them to be 100% brutally honest with you. So I have people sometimes send me videos, and if they're just kind of bouncing the bar off their chest, I'll tell them, hey, you need to create a pause in your chest. And I'll actually tell them that rather than going, well, it's pretty good. If you show up to the meet, you might have to pause a little bit, but overall, you're doing well. And I'm usually like, no, do not compete. Practice for another 12, 16 weeks with a pause in your chest, build some raw power, build some control over the barbell, and then try to compete. So you have to have somebody who'll be honest with you, okay? Now, we do have podcasts that'll help powerlifters. So, for example, we have a podcast that'll just tell you kind of what to expect the first day of a meet. So, your first meet is podcast 318. It's titled Powerlifting Meet Day. So it tells you what's going to happen at the meet, tells you how to prepare, how to pick your selections, kind of tells you a little bit of all the stuff you'll need to know for the first day. Okay, so check that out. It even talks about weight cuts, which you shouldn't do, by the way. So it gives you the pros and cons, the goods and bads. So that's podcast 318. We have a podcast number 237, which covers nutrition concepts for strength athletes. So if you want to make sure you're fueled to perform well, but also look kind of good too, that'll help. Podcast 237. And then in podcast 258, we do have concepts for training for strength and size. So you can kind of learn more about how to train for powerlifting. And then we actually do have a powerlifting program. So it's a general program structure. And it's the structure I use to kind of build from for my individual clients. So we are offering that for $20, or it's free if you sign up to support the podcast. So the podcast, we offer like a $10 a month. You can kind of sign up and just kind of support the podcast, help us make these things more often. So if you sign up for that, the supporting the podcast thing will send you, this programming for free, or you can just buy it for $20. And the reason why we're charging some money for it is to help, again, pay for this podcast. And it's a program that you can actually use for the rest of your life for $20. It gives you the structure to create your workouts with, and then gives you suggestions on what exercises to pick. But you can pick it and develop it and kind of run it on your own. So it's very self-directed. So the money just kind of helps for the time it took me to write it, and then also it helps us promote the gym and pay for the equipment and keep the lights on. But that offer is there. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. You can listen to podcast 258 and some of our other programming podcasts and learn how to handle it yourself. That's totally fine, and I hope you can do that. I hope you can find the help with whichever pathway you choose. So, but those are some podcasts that will help you as a powerlifter, okay? So 318 is the powerlifting meet day, what to know in the first day. 258 is the training stuff for strength and size. 237 is the nutrition concepts for strength athletes. So, how do you know if you're ready to compete as a powerlifter? Make sure your lifts are competition quality first, okay? So you don't go to a meet and kind of bomb out and don't look like you know what you're doing. And then from there, once you know they are, go ahead and compete. So it'll give you kind of like a baseline numbers to do, and it'll give you something to grow on and build from. So it kind of gives you that set kind of starting point. And then you can train for another 12 to 16 weeks and see if you can get your, if in 16 weeks of training you think you can show up to another meet and maybe, have your total be 40 pounds heavier, well then go for it, have fun. But it gives you something to compare from. It gives you that first experience to get your feet wet. So I wouldn't just go do one willy-nilly like this next weekend. So you have to make sure your lifts are competition quality first. Okay? Get some experience, get some knowledge. Run a 12 to 16 week program first. Then go do it. Okay? Cool. Now for strongman, let me flip the video here.